Take my lips, O Lord, and speak through them. Take our minds, O Lord, and think through them. Take our hearts, O Lord, and set them on fire with love for you. Amen. Please be seated. I wasn't looking for an apple tree when I stopped at a nursery in Islip near MacArthur Airport this spring. I was looking for a fig tree, but instead I found 4 apples in one tree. It was tucked away in a corner, a perfectly trained espalier apple tree, which means a tree that had been trained to grow wide, not tall, a tree that had been grafted with multiple types of fruit into one root system. In fact, 4 varieties of apple: Gala, Fuji, Red Delicious, and Empire. And I'd never seen one of these at a nursery before. Not an espalier tree that grows wide, nor a tree with multiple types of fruit. These are like specialty items that you only see in fancy gardens or read about in catalogs. But there was one just waiting for me. So I brought it home and I planted it against a north-facing wall in my newly renovated orchard. Now, that's not the ideal spot, but it's the spot that I had, and I thought of it as the crowning element in this new edible garden at the rectory. Now, I hadn't really thought theologically about that tree until I read this morning's collect. Now, it's beginning to mean so much more to me because I sort of can see what that tree has been trying to teach me. You see, the tree is like our lives, grafted with God's love. God's love has been grafted into our lives like the different varieties have been grafted onto the rootstock of my tree. It's one really holy and beautiful tree, one root system, but 4 different branches that will eventually bear 4 completely different varieties of apple, each with their own distinctive taste. On the upper right, the sweet crispness of Gala. On the lower right, the mild flavor of Fuji. On the upper left, the sweet crispness, the classic taste of Red Delicious. And on the lower left, the tart, sweet balance of Empire apples. Now, it's the same tree, same nourishment from the same roots, but wonderfully different fruit, just like you and me. And our collect for today invites us to reflect on this. It invites God to graft into our hearts the love of God's name, to increase in us true religion, to nourish us with all goodness, and to bring forth in us the fruit of good works. So here's what strikes me. This prayer assumes that there's always something in us worth grafting onto, and that good stock is grafted with grace so that it can bear the kind of abundant fruit that God intends. If you've ever watched grafting, you may already know that it's incredibly detailed and personal work. The gardener has to know each particular tree, each specific branch, each variety they're grafting onto the branch, and the exact moment when their graft can take hold to bear fruit. You can't mass produce grafts or grafted trees. In fact, each one is individual and deliberate and crafted for a particular tree, a particular branch, in order to bear particular but abundant fruit. And like my tree, the fruits of your faith won't look exactly like everyone else's. Your generosity will take a different shape than mine. Your calling will be uniquely personal to you, and here's why. Because God isn't grafting generic goodness into generic hearts. God is grafting specific expressions of divine love into your particular life, your unique circumstances, using your individual gifts, and we can thank God for that. So think with me about this. When do you feel most alive in your faith? And what are you doing when you do that, when you feel that way? Some of us will come alive in moments of quiet prayer. Others maybe in acts of service. Others in creative expression. Some in hospitality. Others in teaching children. Some of us in singing in the choir. Still others working for justice. And that's no accident. That's God grafting grace, love, and generosity into the specific shape of your particular life. The author of the letter to the Hebrews understood this, and when they wrote these words, "Let mutual love continue," then they describe how that love shows up differently in different types of people. They say some people will excel at hospitality to strangers, others at remembering prisoners, others at generosity, others at contentment. And these aren't identical fruits, but they are fruits all growing from the same graft of divine grace working through particular circumstances and specific gifts and individual vocations. Now, here's something else I learned this summer, which is the vulnerability of this grafted life. Now, as you all know, my family and I were away for the month of July, and when we came back, I discovered that the deer had found my little tree, and they had eaten every single leaf off the tree, all the little fruits, leaving nothing but bare branches tied against the wall. All those months of growth were gone, and I stood there looking at this little guy, wondering if this beloved tree would survive, if all that careful grafting had been wasted by my neglect. And it was sort of gutting, both emotionally and spiritually. And I wonder if something like that has ever happened to you. Maybe you're growing, you're bearing fruit, you're feeling connected to God's presence in your life, all the good things, and then something happens that just strips you bare. Could be illness, could be loss, it could be a relationship that falls apart, or a job that ends suddenly, or some disappointment that cuts deeper than you expected, or maybe tragic news on the radio, a horrific event in a distant place. And suddenly you're left wondering if your faith will survive, if your sense of purpose you felt was real, if God's love is still grafted into this world and into your life, or was it all just hope? So when we're feeling stripped and vulnerable, that's just the time to rely on grace. That's precisely the moment when you and I maybe are so unguarded that God can finally come and meet us exactly where we are. In today's gospel reading, Jesus describes watching people protecting themselves, scrambling for places of honor, surrounding themselves with people who can repay them. And he teaches, he says, I know that this makes worldly sense. But what if you tried the opposite? What if rather than protecting yourself all the time, what if you made yourself vulnerable instead? What if you took the lower seat? What if you surrounded yourself with people who can't pay you back, rather than fighting for seats of honor and respect amongst the rich and the powerful? Jesus taught consistently that the way up is down. And it sounds risky, but this grafted life that Jesus describes is worthwhile. And here's what I'm learning from my little stripped apple tree. It's that God's work in us can survive all the things that strip us bare. The connection between branch and root goes deeper than what we can see on the surface. Our value isn't linked to our social position or how much fruit we produce. Our value comes from our identity as children of God and our connection to divine grace. We don't need to strive for places of honor. We can just rest in the place where we're planted and trust in the graft that sustains us. After I found my tree stripped and all the damage done, I had a choice. I could give up on my little tree, or I could attempt the work of restoration. Now that's the route that I chose. I started a patient process of extra watering, careful feeding, obviously some deer repellent to protect the tender new growth, and slowly, leaf by leaf, the tree is coming back. And the thing is, I can tend my little tree, but I can't do your restoration work for you. Only you can tend the specific graft that God has made in your heart. Only you can do the patient work of nurturing your particular calling back to life after it's been stripped bare. Maybe that means returning to prayer after months of feeling empty. Maybe it means taking one small step towards the work that once energized you. Maybe it means reaching out to one person after isolation has left you wondering if you have any value or anything to offer. Maybe it means picking up the creative work that you had abandoned, or trying again at hospitality, or giving yourself permission to feel generous when circumstances all around you make you want to do otherwise. The psalmist reflects on this beautifully when they write, "They have given freely to the poor, and their righteousness stands fast forever." Not because giving is easy, but because the grafted gift of God's love in our hearts produces fruit that endures even when circumstances strip away everything that seemed to be flourishing. And when life strips us bare, and we all know that it does, that graft itself remains, ready to produce new growth in us. But that new growth needs the nourishment that comes from resting in the strength of the graft, which is God's presence in your life. Trusting the divine gardener is still at work, nourishing you from within, especially when you can't see it. Because God knows our hearts, God knows our gifts, God knows exactly what kind of fruit that you and I are meant to bear, because God has grafted God's self into our lives. And God gives us the grace to bear good fruit. So, friends, rest in the one who tends you, and trust in the grace of the graft. Amen.